through the Beatitudes, and Matthew 5:8 says this, happy are the pure in heart. Happy are the pure in heart. And each verse that we've been looking at through this series has kind of given us a step-by-step way to help us to get more healthy as individuals and help us to get more healthy as a church. If you remember, step one was to admit reality. We basically said at this point you need to admit you're not God and that there are things in your life that you are doing that are not healthy for you. They're not healthy for you physically, they're not healthy for you relationally, and they're definitely not healthy for you spiritually. Step two, that we are powerless to control all of our problems, but that God is there, that He cares for us, and that God has the power to handle any problem you give Him. Any problem, no question. Step three we did last week was we must trust God and commit not only our lives to Him, but we need to commit our problems to Him. So building on those three steps, we now come to step four, and this is the cleaning up step. That's why you see come clean back. You saw come clean back here. And here it is in one sentence. Step four is, I have to examine and confess our faults to God and to someone I trust. Now let me say that again because some of you probably shut me off as soon as I said and after God. I have to examine and confess my faults to ourselves, to God, and to someone I trust. And this has to do with cleaning up the past. It has to do with letting go of the past. It has to do with letting go of guilt. It has to do with getting a clean conscience. It has to do with learning to live a guilt-free life the way God intended us to from the very beginning. And this step is major. And the number one obstacle that keeps people from getting healthy is this issue of guilt or remorse or regret. And I believe that if we'd be honest, every one of us has things in our lives, in our past, that if we could go back and change them, we would. Am I right? We all have things like that in our past. If we could go back and change them, we would. We feel ashamed, maybe. We feel even maybe a sense of condemnation, even if it's self-condemnation. But we can't go back and fix it. And the problem is that Satan keeps dragging it up to us. Satan keeps reminding us of it every day. And as long as we listen to Satan, he's going to suck the life out of us. If I could go back and change it, I would. But I can't. So what do? Most people choose to just live life with a load of guilt and spend their time trying to forget or trying to outrun their past. Have you tried to outrun your past? I found this great story this week. Maybe you've heard it, but I'm going to tell it anyway. State policeman was set up radar on the highway, and a tractor-trailer truck came through, and the radar clocked the tractor-trailer at about 92 miles an hour. So he pulled out after the tractor-trailer. Tractor-trailer kept right on going. Turned his lights on. Tractor-trailer going a little faster. Turned his siren on. Tractor-trailer truck just kept right on rolling. Got on the intercom, said, "Please pull over." Didn't pull over. Finally, he called for backup, and finally, there were 4 of them. They finally got this tractor-trailer to pull over. The trooper got out, walked up to the truck, and said, "Didn't you see my lights when I turned them on?" Truck driver says, "Yeah, I saw them." He said, "Well, didn't you hear my siren when I turned that on?" He says, "Yeah, I heard that." He said, "Didn't you hear me say, 'Please pull your vehicle over'?" He says, "Yeah, I heard that." He said, "Why didn't you pull over?" He said, "To be honest with you, a few years ago, my wife left me for a state policeman." And he said, "To be honest, I thought maybe you were bringing her back." can we live in such a way that we are no longer afraid of our past? That's a tough question. How do we get rid of the guilt that seems to follow us like this stink in our lives all along? I think most of us, if we'd be honest, would like to experience what Psalm 32 says when it says, "What happiness for those whose guilt has been forgiven, what release for those who have confessed their sins, and God has cleared their record." I think we'd all love to have a life like that. So let's answer some questions this morning as we get started. First question I want to answer is, why should I deal with guilt? Why should I deal with my guilt? Well, there's lots of reasons, so let me give you a few of them this morning. Number one, if I deal with my guilt, I will gain confidence. If I deal with my guilt, I will gain confidence. Fear and confidence cannot exist at the same time in the same person. You can't be confident and fearful. You're one or the other. Guilt and fear are kind of related. Guilt is the fear that you're going to get caught. Guilt is the fear that you're going to be found out. It's the fear that people will realize that maybe you're not all that you're cracked up to be. It's the fear that if people knew about me, they might reject me. They might not be my friend anymore. They might not care about me anymore. And those two items are acid to the issue of confidence. They erode it. It's like living with a black cloud over your head, hoping that nobody else sees it. And I know my secrets. God knows my secrets. But I don't want anybody else to know my secrets. So if you deal with guilt, you will gain confidence. Second one, if I deal with guilt, your relationships will improve. If I deal with guilt, your relationships will improve. Have you ever noticed, if you're one of those kind of people that can only get so far in a relationship and no further, you will let people get so close to you and then you stiff-arm them. You'll let them know so much, you'll tell them so much, you'll let them experience so much, and then you put on the brakes. I'm not getting any closer. People don't know it, but that comes from fear and guilt. And maybe it comes from anger too. You wound people with a sarcastic tongue. You wound people with a hurtful attitude. You wound people with your behavior. And we do it to keep people away from us. We don't want people to get too close. We don't want people to really know who we are. We don't want people to really know all of the secrets. And because we do that, relationships are destroyed. Relationships never reach the point that God wants them to be. So deal with guilt and relationships improve. Thirdly, if I deal with my guilt, I'll have a better future. If I deal with my guilt, I'll have a better future. Guilt keeps us imprisoned in the past. There are appropriate times to look at the past, don't get me wrong. It gives us perspective. It helps us to know where we've been. It helps us to know where we don't want to go back to. But staring at it, living in it, dwelling in it, it confines us. That's why cars have a large windshield and a small rearview mirror. Because if the whole windshield was a rearview mirror, you couldn't see where you're going. And it's like we're only supposed to, there's parts of our past that we learn from, and there's other parts that we have to just let go and get rid of. We shouldn't dwell on the things that we want to change, but we can't. They're over. They're past. I think it was Rafiki in one of the Disney movies that said, you put your past behind you. Pumbaa. Somebody said it. Okay. Guilt can't change the past, just like worry can't change the future. That's why this step is so important. This fourth step is so important, but it is so scary. It's so scary that most people won't do it because it separates those that want to talk, that really want to get healthy, the ones that really want to go deeper in relationships, the ones that really want to go deeper with God. It separates those from those that just want to talk about getting healthy, those that just want to talk about going deeper with God. This step is for people that really want to come clean and move forward. So let's get to the main question today, and that's this. How do we get rid of our guilt? How do we get rid of it? The guilt that you have may be so deeply entrenched in your life, it may have such a tight grip on you. How in the world am I going to get rid of it? How are you going to get rid of it? Well, the first step is clean out your closet. Clean out your closet. I'm sure you've heard the expression, because we're just coming out of an election year, skeletons in the closet. Well, where are those closets? Oh, for a lot of us, they're in your mind. They are in your past. They are in those places that you hide your secrets away in. You don't want anyone knowing about them because you don't want them coming out. You don't want them to be brought to life. You don't want people to know about them. You need to take a personal inventory of your life, and you've got stuff in your closet today that you know needs to go. Needs to get put in the dumpster, the garbage can, wherever you want to throw it. And how do you do that? How do you get rid of the stuff that you think if you leave it alone long enough, it'll go away? Well, you need to set a specific time aside where you get alone and clean out your moral closet. I recommend you take a Bible. I recommend you take some paper, a pencil, and maybe even a box of tissues, because I'm going to tell you something. It's going to get ugly, and it's going to get messy. And you get alone and you ask yourself, what have I been guilty of? You ask yourself, what have I regretted in my life? What do I know is there, but I've never confessed it to anyone? And then write it down. Write it down. Lamentations 3:40 says this, let us examine our ways. That means we need to take a moral inventory of everything in us that's hidden, of everything in us that is secret, of everything in us that is producing guilt in our lives. Now, maybe for some, there are some things that you've denied for so long, you won't put them on the list because you don't want to accept blame. They're so far back in the closet, you don't even want to go there. You don't even want to open that box. And there are some things that are back in your closet that you will only put on your list when God says, you know what? Write that down. How can you leave that off your list? And there may be some things that God sees that you don't. That God says, oh, by the way, here's another item for your list. Psalm 139 says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test my thoughts. Point out anything that you find in me that makes you sad. Are you willing to take time and pray that and listen for God to answer today? Now you may think, do I have to write all these down, Jim? Really? I mean, seriously, can't I just remember them? No. Because when you write them down, they become specific. Maybe you say, well, can't I just pray about them? No. Writing them down proves that you are honest and that you are willing and wanting to do something about them. Writing them down helps you face the reality. Writing them down helps you deny the problems that you have in your life. Let's say you have an area in your closet. I don't know if you're like my daughter, which now that she's home, her closet has areas. And heaven forbid something gets in the wrong area. But if you have an area in your closet called attitudes, you got to go there. You have to ask, what in this section of my closet needs to be cleaned out? What attitudes do I have in this part of my closet that I need to get rid of? Things like complaining, criticalness, ungratefulness. What is in that section of your closet this morning that needs to be gotten out and gotten rid of? And then you go to another section of your closet, and that's the relationship section. Is there bitterness there? Is there a need to always be the main person there? Is there a need to seek revenge there? Is there an unwillingness to forgive there? Is there a need to be better than everybody else there? Clean it out. I think if we'd be honest, we could probably all spend a day in our closets. And really, that's the point if you think about it, isn't it? What about the integrity section? What do you got in there that needs to go? And the list can just go on and on and on. What about the priority section? Has there ever been a time when God was really first place in your life, but maybe for some reason or another, now He's dropped to second, or maybe third, or maybe fifth, or maybe not in the top 10? The next one is stop blaming, denying, and avoiding. It's like a merry-go-round. And it's all because we won't stop playing the game. I blame, I deny, I avoid. I blame, I deny, I avoid. I blame, I deny, I avoid. It's not my fault, it's not my issue. I don't want to talk about it. And we do it over and over and over and over, and we think that it will disappear, but it won't. Get it out of the closet. Proverbs 20:27 says, "The Lord gave us a mind and a conscience we cannot hide from ourselves." You know what's the biggest thing that keeps you from healing this morning? You. You're the biggest thing that keeps you from healing. The greatest holdup is your hang-up. This is all about becoming radically honest and admit that you're the problem. There are painful things in our lives that aren't our fault, but I'll tell you what, there's plenty of painful things in our lives that are our fault, and it's about time we admit those. And if we don't admit them, we're just going to keep playing the game over and over and over. You know, if I change jobs, things will be better. If I move, things will be better. If I go to another church, things will be better. If I move to a different town, things will be better. The problem that you have to face is this. Wherever you go to get away from the problem, you're still there, and you're the problem. You need to accept responsibility for our faults. Don't rationalize. Don't say to yourself, this is just a stage. Don't blame someone else. Don't deny. Don't avoid it. The question becomes this. What are you being dishonest about, but you're really guilty? And why are you doing it? 1 John 1:9 says, if we freely admit that we have sinned, we find God utterly reliable. He forgives our sin and He makes us thoroughly clean from all that is evil. Look at the order in that verse. It says, if we tell God. That's first. If we say, God, this is the truth about me, then look what happens. God forgives your sin, makes you clean. Does He do it because you've earned it? Are you kidding me? We haven't earned a thing. He does it because that is who God is. Something we need to learn about the nature of God is this: God's reliable, and He doesn't break His promises. He's there. The story goes about a woman who was dying of AIDS, contracted through living a promiscuous lifestyle. And she asked if she could get a pastor to come to her home and visit her before her time was up. And when the pastor arrived, she invited him in, sat down. She just said, "Pastor, I am so lost. I have ruined my life. There is no hope for me. And in days, weeks maybe," she goes, "I am going to die and I'm going to go to hell. And I have no hope." And the pastor looked at her for a moment, and he looked around the house, and he saw on the dresser a picture of a beautiful young woman, and he said, "Do you mind if I ask you who that is?" And she said, That's my daughter." And the pastor said, "Well, can I ask you a question?" She said, "Sure." He said, "Would you help her if she were in trouble, no matter how many times she screwed up?" She said, "Of course." And she said, "Would you forgive her if she asked you to, no matter how many times she screwed up?" And the woman said, "Of course I would. Why would you even ask me a question like that?" The pastor said, "Because I want you to understand that God has your picture on His dresser. And He loves you more than you love your daughter. He loves you more than you will ever be able to comprehend." Isaiah 1:18 says, "No matter how deep the stain of your sin is, I can take it out and make it as clean as freshly fallen snow." Next step is this: you must tell a Christian friend. Now let me say that again. You must tell a Christian friend. God says that's essential to your recovery. If you have done all 3 steps so far, then step 4 requires you to add a trusted Christian friend to the equation. The Bible teaches us in James 5:16, "Admit your faults to one another and pray for each other that you may be healed." It's one of those verses we don't like a whole lot. Now you maybe say, "Jim, why do I need to bring somebody else into this?" Because God says it right there in that passage that revealing your feelings is the beginning of healings. The more you hide, the bigger it gets. The more secrets you keep, the bigger it gets. The neat thing is this: when you risk honesty with somebody, when you risk honesty with someone that you trust, a good Christian person, a freedom comes into your life. You don't need more than one person. You don't need to go and stand up here and tell everybody. But you need one person. Is there anyone in your life that you have that you can be completely honest with? And if there isn't, there's something wrong. If you don't have a person in your life that you can be completely honest with, you've got a problem. I will say this: I believe there are people in this room right now that would be willing to come and stand beside you and walk with you and pray with you through step 4. This is one of God's ways to free us from the guilt of the past. This is one of God's ways to free us from the remorse and from the regret of the past. You go to someone who is a devoted follower of Christ, and they will understand this. All of us need to confess. We all need forgiveness. We all need freedom from guilt. We all need freedom of those memories of the past that Satan uses to just beat us up on a regular basis. And because they've walked down that road, They'll be compassionate and not condemning. You need somebody with a compassionate heart, and devoted Christ followers have that. You also need someone who is strong enough to tell you if you're still trying to deny it. They need to be able to tell you if you're still trying to cover it up. They need to tell you if you're still trying to blame, or if you're still trying to avoid, or if you're still trying to procrastinate. You go to this person with your list, and you say, I need someone to listen to me as I take step 4 in my step of getting healthy and recovering and being the person that God meant me to be, and you do it as soon as possible. And maybe you're here thinking, well, Jim, I've done steps 1 through 3, but I need a break. Man, I'm wore out. Maybe I'll do step 4 in a few months. You know what that tells me? That just tells me you need a little more pain in your life before you're going to come to the realization of what you really need. And I'll tell you what, you'll get it. And then maybe you'll finally come to your senses. It takes courage to do it, but we all know God is powerful enough to give us the courage to be honest with ourselves, honest with God, and honest with a trusted friend. God will do that for us. And then lastly is accept God's forgiveness and forgive ourselves. This is something you can't miss. This step is for everybody. Every one of us needs step 4. The Bible says all have sinned. There's nobody who can say, I don't need this step. We've all sinned. And here's the good news. God forgives. God forgives. Doesn't matter how bad it is. Doesn't matter how many times you've done it. When we go to Him genuinely and honestly, He forgives instantly. He forgives freely. He forgives completely. And the forgiveness that He gives sets us free from our past, and you get a chance to start all over again. And that's what forgiveness does. It gives you the chance to be who God always wanted you to be from the day you first set foot on this planet. So this morning, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to look into the face and the forgiveness of Jesus Christ and discover the chance to become the man or the woman that God has intended you to be, as if you've never sinned. Your guilt can be removed, and you get a chance to live a brand new life.